Mr. President, I rise to take note of the answer of the Attorney-General to my question regarding the foreign fighters legislation, which is due to be introduced today, and also the reinstatement of funding to the Independent National Security Legislation Monitor. Today we've been debating the National Security Legislation Amendment Bill No. 1, which is the first tranche of significant national security legislation, and this afternoon we anticipate the introduction of the second tranche, known as the Foreign Fighters Bill. Both of these bills contain significant and far-reaching changes that will fundamentally affect some long-held values of our justice system and the civil liberties of every Australian. The Australian Greens are committed to protecting Australians from terrorism. Of course we are. We live in and of this community. Our family, our friends live in this community. But we are also committed to safeguarding the rights of innocent Australians and ensuring that we don't give up, in the end, the very freedoms that we actually want to protect from terrorism. Make no mistake, public safety is paramount. So a fundamental question has to be, will these laws really make us safer? To start with, the greatest threat to Australia's security is heading into an unwinnable war in the Middle East. And the best way to make us safer in Australia is actually to bring people together and not to have division, suspicion, mistrust and violence. The Australian Greens support the intention of the government to prevent terrorism, but we're very concerned that these extensive and extended laws will be rushed through without sufficient scrutiny or input from those who are most affected from the Australian community. Australia's counter-terrorism organisations already have very extensive powers, and at times of heightened fear, suspicion and threat, the sorts of times that we're living in Australia at the moment, civil liberties and established legal rights are more vital than ever. The Foreign Fighters Bill includes an extension of preventative detention orders for a further 10 years, and this is despite the COAG review of counter-terrorism laws recommending that they be repealed. It's also despite reports by the Independent National Security Legislation Monitor that preventative detention orders are not effective, not appropriate and not necessary. In fact, the INSLM said that they simply should be abolished because they're worse than useless. Indeed, even in today, in The Guardian, Mr Brett Walker, SC, the former INSLM, was reported as saying he did not understand why control orders and preventative detention orders were necessary, given the powers already available to police and intelligence agencies. Mr Walker said, and I quote, "The problem is that people think that passing laws makes us safer." Well, not unless the laws are necessary because we lacked powers to keep us safe. The existing laws should be properly implemented. In his response to my question today, the Attorney-General has acknowledged that the national security legislation contains unusual and far-reaching powers. He also waxed lyrical about the Coalition's role in the creation of the INSLM as a watchdog. But Mr Walker's term expired in April. The government planned to abolish the position and presented a bill to abolish the INSLM in May. The government changed its mind in July, but the position remains vacant to date, and there has been no funding and no announcement as to funding. At a time when these extensive changes are being brought in, the Attorney-General has not been willing today to inform the Senate as to when the INSLM will be appointed, merely remaining coy about that and using a very ambiguous phrase like soon. What does that mean? He did not answer the question about funding of the INSLM at all. These laws come on the back of already extensive national security laws that were introduced in 2005. They contain restrictions and will have consequences that have the potential to affect every Australian, us, our children and our neighbours. Let's be clear, it's not the guilty we want to protect, but the innocent, those who get caught up inadvertently and end up suffering from the curtailment of freedoms that these laws may usher in. It's for that reason that we need a properly considered and scrutinised legislation. We need an independent committee to be looking at these laws, because once they're on the books, they can be very hard to shift, and what may be an initial and hurried response could change the landscape in Australia forever.